Imagine sitting down to dinner 50,000 years ago. No supermarkets, no drive-through, not even a friendly neighborhood bakery. If you wanted to eat, you walked, hunted, dug, or climbed for it. In this journey, we'll explore the diets of prehistoric people, the real Paleo story, richer and more varied than most expect. The Paleolithic, or Old Stone Age, is where humanity's long culinary adventure begins. During this time, species like Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and eventually Homo sapiens roamed the earth as nomadic hunter-gatherers. Their pantry was simply whatever nature offered within reach. Meat came from large herbivores like mammoth, aurochs, bison, and deer. Smaller animals, rabbits, wild birds, and reptiles also filled bellies. Neanderthals in coastal areas relied heavily on shellfish, proving that seafood wasn't an invention of modern beach culture. Tools made of flint allowed them to butcher meat efficiently and reach the nutrient-rich marrow inside bones. Plants were far more important than many popular stereotypes suggest. Wild berries, nuts, seeds, edible roots, and leafy greens were seasonal staples, and in certain areas, starchy tubers provided steady energy. Evidence shows that early humans even used grinding stones to process seeds, a hint that bread-making's distant ancestors were already in motion. Honey was another prized food, though getting it sometimes meant braving a swarm of angry bees. The reward was a calorie-dense burst of sweetness that could fuel a long hunt. The mastery of fire was a game changer. Cooking made food easier to chew and digest, boosted caloric yield, and reduced the danger of toxins in certain plants. Meat could be smoked or dried, making it last longer and taste better, while cooler caves sometimes served as natural refrigerators. The first leftovers were born. What people ate depended heavily on the environment around them. In ice-age tundra regions where plant foods were scarce, the diet tilted heavily toward meat and fat, a natural adaptation to freezing conditions. In savannas and grasslands, food sources were more balanced: grazing animals, edible tubers, and seasonal fruits. Along rivers and coasts, fish, shellfish, and waterfowl were plentiful and became critical seasonal staples. Archaeological sites littered with old shell piles called midden heaps tell us some communities maintained long-standing seafood traditions. For prehistoric people, variety wasn't a luxury. It was insurance against starvation. When the climate shifted or game migrated, having a mixed toolkit of food sources could mean the difference between life and death. Around 10,000 years ago, a revolution began: farming. This shift marked the dawn of the Neolithic period. Humans started deliberately planting crops and raising animals. Wheat, barley, rice, and millet became common crops, and animals like goats, sheep, pigs, and cattle were domesticated. These changes allowed food to be stored against future shortages and meant people could settle in one area, building the first permanent villages. But this stability came at a cost. Diets became less diverse, and reliance on a few staple foods made communities more vulnerable to famine if a harvest failed. Farming introduced new food experiences. Bread and porridge emerged from domesticated grains. Legumes like lentils and peas became plant-based protein sources. In some parts of the world, humans began to consume dairy, though the earliest cheeses and yogurts were probably a far cry from what you'd find on a modern charcuterie board. There's also tantalizing archaeological evidence that beer-making appeared surprisingly early, perhaps tied to rituals or seasonal celebrations. Archaeology continues to surprise us about prehistoric eating habits. Charred food remains found at dig sites in Jordan suggest that flatbread-like products existed thousands of years before agriculture took root. This means hunter-gatherers were perfectly capable of experimenting with complex carbs. Huge piles of animal bones found in certain locations point to large-scale feasting, possibly seasonal gatherings for trade, bonding, or ceremony. Chemical residue inside prehistoric pottery sometimes even includes wild mustard seeds and aromatic leaves, showing that flavor mattered as much as sustenance. If someone could stand over a clay pot in 6000 BCE and say, "This stew needs a kick," then culinary creativity has very deep roots. Looking at the diets of our ancestors teaches us a few important lessons. First, diversity was a survival strategy. Prehistoric communities often consumed dozens of different plant and animal species in a single year. Second, adaptability was crucial. Climate swings, shifting seasons, and migrations demanded flexibility. The most adaptable eaters were often the most successful survivors. Third, food was a deeply social affair. Whether gathered around a fire to roast meat or working together to grind seeds into flour, eating was about more than survival, it was about connection and culture. The prehistoric diet was not one single diet, but a shifting, inventive response to environment, season, and necessity. It evolved from opportunistic foraging through masterful seasonal adaptation to the calculated planning of early agriculture. In every stage, it was shaped not only by what was available, but also by human ingenuity and creativity. The next time you open your fridge, remember that your ancestors' menu was dictated by skill, adaptability, and a bit of daring. Every mouthful they ate carried the story of survival and innovation, a story far richer than any supermarket aisle.